Welcome to The Real Life Buyer. Whether you are buying for yourself or your business, here you will find tips, techniques and knowledge to support your journey to buying smart. Interviewing business owners and technical experts to give you information and guidance before parting with your money. Save money, time and get what you want when you want it. Now introducing the Real Life Buyer, Dave Barr.
Hello and welcome to The Real Life Buyer. Today I have a very special guest all the way from the United States of America, Mr. Gordon P Firemark, also known as the podcast lawyer. After commencing legal practice in 1992, Gordon has supported the entertainment world through his law offices based in Los Angeles, California. Gordon is also a 12-year veteran of podcasting, has taught and offered courses in a number of universities, colleges and law schools, and been a guest lecturer in many other academic establishments over his career. As a procurement professional by trade, being aware of the legal aspects of my adventure into the entertainment industry soon appeared on my radar, and it was not long before I discovered the podcast lawyer. What appealed to me was how approachable and friendly Gordon was, and I soon reached out with a few tentative questions. Within a few hours, I received a most helpful and engaging response from Gordon, and he soon impressed me with his thoughts and approach. I now closely follow Gordon and his work, and am rewarded with insightful education and entertainment from his videos and podcasted words of wisdom. So, without further ado, I welcome Mr. Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, to my humble podcast. Hello, Gordon.
Hi, Dave. Thank you so much for having me. And now after the interview, I'm going to have to go out and buy a new hat because I think I've gone up a size or two. Thank you for that lovely
it's
introduction.
Well deserved. So perhaps you could spend a few minutes telling the listeners about yourself and your journey in the legal profession.
Well, as you said, I have been practicing entertainment and media law for almost 30 years now. And before getting into that field, I studied radio and television and film, having come up from the backstage world of live theater as a sound technician. So the podcasting is sort of an opportunity for me to combine all of my abilities and facilities into something that I enjoy. But my passion really is for helping creative people to realize their dreams and achieve their goals. And so I've been able to do that by being a lawyer and helping filmmakers and producers and writers and directors in the television and film industry, in the live theater space, authors, producers, and creatives. And when I discovered podcasting myself about 12, 14 years ago, first as a guest expert, and then realizing how much fun it was, I started my own show, and several other shows that have come and gone in that interim as well. Uh, it was an obvious thing, and I recognized that there was an absence of information out there for podcasters and digital creatives, and so I set out to first off scratch my own itch, do some research, and identify the issues for myself, and then make that public for other people so that I can continue helping them to do their thing.
That's fantastic. Very much appreciated as well, I must say.
Thanks.
So, what do your legal services encompass? And what would you say is your USP?
Well, my legal services, I'm not a litigation attorney, so I'm never in the courtroom. I tend to hand off disputes at the moment it becomes clear that there is no negotiated outcome to be had. Most of my work, though, is on the building side of creating projects. I help people with the development and the financing and the production of their films, television shows, theatrical projects, and in the podcasting space as well, help them identify the subject matter. If there's underlying literary material that's at the root of things, I'll help them acquire the necessary rights, and all of the issues that come up with clearing rights, protecting their own rights, their property rights, their trademarks, brands, things like that, and setting up businesses that make sense for their enterprise. to protect their interests and things. So really more on the business building side of things most of the time.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Now, certainly for
Oh,
me, oh, sorry.
you asked me what's my USP.
Ah, very true.
My USP is me, I think. Look, there are plenty of lawyers out there who can do the kind of work that I do. I think what I bring to the table is the background that I've already explained to you, and my personality. My approach to things is a collaborative one and a creative one. Lots of lawyers can tear things down. I like to be on the side of building and finding appropriate solutions to accomplish what the client wants, even when there may be hurdles and obstacles in the way.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Certainly for me, and I'm sure possibly for other people, but approaching an attorney, particularly one that perhaps is as famous as you are, can seem a rather daunting and intimidating proposition. How would you suggest a potential client seek out and identify an entertainment attorney?
Well, that's a great question, Dave. I think first of all, remember that as famous as a person is, they're still just a person, and they have their own insecurities and own issues and things like that. And hopefully, they don't bring too many issues to the table when it comes to a business relationship. But I'm a business, I'm a service provider, so what I do is help people, and I want to be available to help people. So approaching someone like me shouldn't be an uncomfortable or challenging thing. It should be fairly natural. That said, people mostly are concerned about what's it going to cost, right? Uh, I mean,
I'll
let's
come
be
on to that
honest.
one later.
Right. But the point is that, it doesn't do me any good to have prices so high that I can't help anybody because they can't afford me. So, you might be surprised how reasonable things can be. Sometimes the initial number will be a staggering figure, and then you realize when you compare it to value. But anyway, finding and approaching an entertainment lawyer should be a matter of doing your legwork, your research, asking around. If you have friends who are in the business, their referrals can be extremely valuable. But then ultimately, it should come down to, assuming all other things in terms of competence and ability are equal, finding somebody that you click with, that you get along with, and who gets you is really important.
Absolutely. Yes, I quite agree. So, how would you suggest one could go about pre qualifying attorneys in order to shortlist a few for consideration?
Well, I think it's the same answer. Do your research, get the referrals from other people. Look, there is nothing better than a person saying, you should talk to so and so, hire him, you won't be disappointed, right? From somebody you trust, of course. You can search their disciplinary records in the state in which that person is, or the nation where they're licensed. You can usually find out a bit about them that way. And there are, some lawyers get reviewed on Yelp and things like that. I don't think that's a very helpful approach, because it's usually people with sour grapes that post their comments and reviews there. And let's face it, you can't please everybody all the time, and probably shouldn't try. So, you're going to rub someone's feathers the wrong way a little bit,
Yeah.
ruffle someone's feathers sometimes. But I think it's just a matter of research and investigation, and then ask the hard questions when you interview a lawyer. Um, you know, can you help me? Have you done this before? Maybe ask for references. I prefer not to give references because I value my existing clients' privacy. But, if you ask, I can usually point you to somebody you can talk to. And those kinds of questions, just like if you're hiring any professional, don't just assume because they have a degree on the wall behind their desk, like those behind me. Don't just assume that they're good at what they say they can do, because anybody can become a lawyer, and practicing in a field where you need expertise, that can require some experience. So, especially with entertainment law, I'll tell you that there are a lot of folks out there who do family law, divorces, and those kinds of things, or criminal defense law, but they also say they do entertainment law, and that's because they're interested and they like the subject. And sure, if something comes along, they'll take it on and try to learn what they need to learn or whatever. Those of us that are in the trenches doing this stuff every single day come at it just a little differently, with a little more pragmatism and efficiency, frankly.
Right. Entertainment is quite a wide spectrum.
Hmm.
So, how would you say, or how would you interpret it, particular criteria and attributes that perhaps a person should be seeking when trying to find somebody to help them? Because it's such a wide sphere of in scope. Would you say there's particular things that one should look for that perhaps pertain directly to the client?
You know, well, certainly if you are a musician and you're looking for an entertainment lawyer, you want one who's versed in the music industry. As I've said, I'm a film and television and digital media lawyer. I don't do record deals and music publishing deals. I do work with music in film, television, theater, and podcasting and things like that. But if you were to ask me what's a standard term in a recording agreement for a new artist, I probably wouldn't be the best person to answer that question. And vice versa. There are folks who are really good in the music field who just don't know much about how film business operates.
Mm.
And if you're doing a financing project, you need to make sure the person has the experience in that subset of the work.
Yeah,
Um, and ultimately, experience is the telltale.
yeah, it's all part of your due diligence, I would suggest
Mm-hmm,
then.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, yeah. So just thinking about the first meeting,
mm-hmm.
so you found the attorney that you want to work with. What would you say would be the best way to prepare for that meeting to achieve the best value and understanding for both parties?
I think that having your papers with you and ready to go to show the person is a good idea. Although many times in the first, especially if it's a free consultation, we won't want to look at a lot of documents. We may want to get a general sense of things. Having your questions prepared in advance, so it's not a seat of the pants kind of a thing, I think is the best thing. And and sort of knowing what to look for. What are the signals that this person is interested and engaged with you in the conversation? You have their full attention, unless there's an important reason why you wouldn't, and and that they're genuinely interested in helping and not just about collecting a fee and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that leads nicely on to the word rapport.
Hmm.
I thought the rapport between a professional person and his client would be quite important. And how would you suggest is the best way to go about building a positive relationship and a good way of working with your clients? What do you do?
Well, it's definitely a two-way street. Myself, I really just try to be myself, and I am genuinely interested in the people that I meet with. Everybody has an interesting story. Everybody has something interesting that they do, and so I try to take that interest.
Mm.
Um, I think that being open and transparent about who you are and what's going on is very important. And look, we all make mistakes. We all have issues. If somebody shows up late to my office for a meeting, back when we had meetings in the office. Uh,
Long time ago.
well, we're recording this in the middle of a pandemic, so um, you know, uh, being understanding. Obviously, you can forgive only so far. If someone is disrespectful of your time, that's a different story, and that goes both ways for lawyer and client. Everybody's busy. Lawyers are tend to be very busy and very stressed out. Um, really, just trying to remember that everybody has their things, their stuff, and and not allowing our stresses to be taken out on people across the table from us, unless they're really the cause of the stress. But
Yeah, yeah,
most of the time, it's usually external things that are unrelated to the meeting. So being you want to be present in the meeting, both sides, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Distraction is a sign of disrespect too, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, being engaged in the conversation and
Hmm.
actively listening as well as
Yeah,
talking. Clearly, yes. You mentioned a little bit earlier on the terrible word of finance and budgets.
yeah.
Just trying to give people a rough idea of a budget. What should a client be prepared for? Are there different fee structures and packages that are available for people?
Well, there are lots of different ways that lawyers actually charge for their time. The most commonly understood is the hourly rate. And that's actually just a function of, sort of the middle of the 20th century that became the way, because some management consultants were looking to quantify and do measurement on things. So it became the way that law firms charge. And the lawyers' hourly rates range nowadays, here in the US in dollars, anywhere from about $200 or $300 per hour up to the neighborhood of $1,000 per hour or more, uh, really depending on the level of expertise and experience, the the level of detail needed in the particular subject matter. Some lawyers work in a very narrow niche, and so by the time you need them, it's critical, and they can afford to charge a little more. That's true of entertainment law, to be honest.
Mm.
But also, yeah, it's just a longevity in the field. You can't charge as much for a young lawyer who's going to take 2 or 3 times longer to do something uh, as you would for a senior lawyer who can get it done quickly, knows right where to look, and has the life experience and the practice experience to make everything work.
Yeah. Okay.
Other ways that lawyers charge for their time, sometimes it's a flat rate, sometimes it's a percentage of, in the entertainment industry in particular, many of us that represent artists will do a percentage of the artist's income.
Ah,
And not just on the one deal, but it's sort of a career-wide, global kind of a thing. At least during the time that we represent them, anything that happens will receive a percentage of their earnings from that, and a long tail, even after the representation relationship might have ended, but the revenue from that particular film project or whatever is still coming in. We'll continue to receive that. So there's the flat rates, the percentages. There's a principle called value billing, where you really just set a price. Okay, this is what this is worth. And I try to use that when I can for many of my especially for those sort of routine tasks that might only take me 10 minutes, but have tremendous value for the client. Wouldn't be worth it for me to do it for 10 minutes worth of hourly rate.
yeah.
So we just come to a number, and you can often negotiate with lawyers.
Okay. Yeah. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
If we move away from the law office side and
Mm-hmm.
talk about your life in podcasting for a minute,
Yep.
can you explain what drew you into podcasting originally and has since kept you involved in this media?
Well, I think the bottom line, it comes down to I like the sound of my own voice. But no, I mean, I think it's an extension of the reasons that I do everything I do. Is it's my opportunity to help some people. I like to teach. In fact, I do quite a lot of teaching outside my podcasting as well. But I like to teach. I like to inform. I think I'm good at clarifying principles that are complicated and distilling them down to things that people can understand. So my show is called Entertainment Law Update, where I actually analyze cases and entertainment law news and sort of break it down. Not so much for lay people, but for other lawyers and law students and professionals in the entertainment industry. So what really drew me to it was, well, I've always been a techie geek, and I was a sound technician, as I said, in live theater and that kind of thing before I went to college and law school. And so this was an opportunity for me to bring back and play with cool microphones and mixing boards and things like that. And to make something that I can put out there. It's a little bit of a legacy for me also. I expect that some of my stuff will be out there for a long time after I'm gone and helping people.
Okay, so somewhat of an artist, perhaps you think, and
I
you're
guess it's my
creative.
creative outlet. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You talked about the podcast that you mentioned, the entertainment one.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about the podcasts you've created? So I think there might have been a few, and those you've featured in as well.
Wow. Well, so Entertainment Law Update. Well, I'll start at the very beginning. My first experience with podcasting was as a guest expert on a show called The Law and Video. And the host of that show had an audience of videographers who were asking questions about legal stuff. And so he brought me on as a guest, and we did a few Q&A and spent an hour or so doing that. And then he had me back again and again. Pretty soon it turned into The Law and Video. I'm sorry, his show was called The DV Show. And we started as a guest on that, and we created The Law and Video, which was the Q&A show. Every couple of weeks we would record an episode. After a while, he sort of lost interest in that. I think we'd sort of tapped out some of the basics on that. And he had to go in another direction for his day job. But I wanted to keep doing it. So I created Entertainment Law Update, sort of in the model of a show. There's a fellow named Leo Laporte who has a show called Twit, This Week in Tech. And now he's got a whole network built around This Week In. And he was doing this sort of roundtable show where they would look at the news and talk about it and express opinion and so on. So I created a show sort of like that, found a co-host, actually using Twitter. I just put it out there. Anybody know an entertainment lawyer outside Los Angeles? I didn't want somebody in my direct competition area. And everybody pointed to the same person. So it was an obvious choice. we did that and started recording back in 2009, and we do a monthly roundup. Along the way, somewhere in there, I created a show called Entertainment Industry Insights, which was me interviewing entertainment industry professionals. That only lasted a few episodes before it just sort of fizzled out. I didn't have the bandwidth to constantly try to read people's books and book new guests and all those kinds of things. So that's just sitting there. There's a few episodes. I have a YouTube channel where I do questions and answers. I call it Entertainment Law Asked and Answered. And we've got more than 150 or so videos up there. They're short, three or 4 minute Q&A. And we've taken the audio from those and also made that into a podcast feed. And then I have a show called More, Better, Faster, which is me really just coaching and talking about how to achieve your goals. It has nothing to do with law or entertainment. It's really just about achievement and effectiveness, basically personal growth, personal effectiveness. And we're 65 or so episodes into that. And it's been on hiatus for a while. During the pandemic, I've sort of been focusing on other things, but I expect I'll bring that back at some point.
Wow, pretty amazing that. I must admit, I went onto one of the podcast platforms and did a search of your name, and it's amazed how many things you've been involved in and featured in as well.
Yeah, I've been a guest on a lot of podcasts, many of them around the podcasting arena. And in fact, at the beginning of 2020, I set a goal of being a guest on 50 shows this year. And I haven't been keeping close track because of the pandemic, but I think I'm pretty close to being on track. I'm probably in the neighborhood of 40, and we've got a few weeks left. So,
still a chance yet then.
Yep.
That's interesting. You mentioned about the different positions you've held. So, do you prefer to be a solo act, or to have a co-host, or to be the person being interviewed?
It's easy to be interviewed because you just show up and answer questions. Being a solo host, I think, is the hardest because it requires planning and thought and clarity. And I tend to use crutch words quite a lot. And I tend to do that more when I'm just thinking off the top of my head. With a guest, with a co-host, it's a banter. We're engaging in a conversation, and that show we're pretty well organized. We have, because it's a flagship show and it's a heavy subject matter, I have a team of about 6 young lawyers, and well, a couple of them are older than me, but entertainment law fans who help us identify the stories and brief the cases and figure out the analysis and so on. And then my co-host and I, Tamara, we get together and do our show once a month from the notes that they have crafted for us. And so that's pretty, I won't say easy, but it simplifies the process. And having it be a conversation, if one of us loses our train of thought or gets stuck on something, the other usually can step in and continue the line of thought. And that makes it pretty easy. And frankly, it's just nice to have more than one voice to listen to as listeners. No. But I think there's room for all of them. So I don't have a preference necessarily.
Okay, that's interesting. So if you're able to restart your life in podcasting, knowing what you know now, what main things would you do differently and why?
Well, I think the biggest mistake I've made in podcasting was when I created Entertainment Law Update, I created a show that I would want to listen to. I created a show for people like me. I'm educating my competition in the entertainment law space and not reaching out to potential clients to generate business for my practice. Now, it has had that as a byproduct because it positions me as an expert. It shows that I'm a thought leader in the field, and I get referrals from those lawyers that I do educate. But if I had it to do over again, I think I would be much more deliberate about targeting an audience of people who are likely to become clients or customers. And that's ultimately one of the ways you monetize a podcast is use it as a platform to create thought leadership, the know, like, and trust factor that gets people to buy from you. And there you go. Other entertainment lawyers don't need to buy anything from me. So that was a strategic mistake on my part. Beyond that, I would say if I had it to do over, I think I would, some of the other shows, this is where I've come, I would have a longer term plan for what the episodes would be. So I'm not forced into a box of having to think of something the day it's time to record, having a little more runway, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So I can take off.
Okay. What attributes, behaviors, and processes would you say are beneficial to the life of a podcaster and can contribute to the increased chance of success? I'm new to this game, and to learn from somebody like yourself would be extremely useful. So, what things should I be doing to hopefully make sure that I'm successful in this adventure?
Well, I think that being strategic and having a plan is important. Being persistent and having a thick skin, because there will be those who criticize and have unkind things to say. I think not being too concerned with the numbers and the data early on, and just focus on momentum and quality of content. Not even worried about quality of sound too much. I mean, it has to be comfortable to listen to, but whether you're using a very expensive microphone or an inexpensive one, as long as they can hear you and there's not a lot of hiss and noise and pops and background stuff, I think that's important. But it ultimately comes down to the quality of the content. Are you providing real value? Are you helping your listeners accomplish something, solve a problem, or come to an enlightened view of things? I guess that's really the game. So what's beneficial traits? Yeah, persistence, thick skin, and taking it all as a bit of a, if not a game, an experiment. What if I do this? What if I do it? Being playful about it, I guess I could say.
Yeah. That's why I tend to refer to it as an adventure for myself.
Yeah, good.
So it's all, I'm really enjoying the experience, and I love talking to people. In my role, I regularly obviously speak to suppliers, and I really enjoy the interaction with people. So this is an extension of that, really.
Yeah, a genuine interest in people and in helping them, I think, is really critical to success.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the Legit Podcast Pro group as featured on Facebook. What's the purpose of the group and your driving force behind it?
Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to talk about Legit Podcast Pro. It's a group that I've created to help people who are genuinely, interested and serious about their podcasting and want to make it, if not their primary business, at the very least, a lucrative side hustle kind of a business. It's people who want to make money using podcasting as their vehicle, whether it's as a host of a show, producer of a show, maybe you just want to edit other people's shows, whatever it is, how to build a business around podcasting. And there's an awful lot of conventional wisdom around this subject, but it's very scattered and there's lots of different ways to do these things. Most often what I'm seeing, and as a practicing lawyer look, I help people set their stuff up all the time. The ones who succeed tend to be the ones who have certain traits and I don't know, characteristics. They tend to have a vision, they tend to have a plan, and they tend to have their business stuff squared away. They're ready to earn money from what they're doing. And so I want to help podcasters get to that point. And I recognize that cost concern about lawyers and that last part of having their business set up and their intellectual property protected and those things can be a real stumbling block for people. So I've created a course that trains people on how to do this for themselves, much of this by themselves. So the Legit Podcast Pro group is sort of designed to get people thinking about this, and maybe some of them will buy the course.
Absolutely. In fact, I have. So I must admit, I'm quite enjoying it. Thank you
Oh,
for
good.
that. Looking at the group now, you're posting regularly video content. How has the journey been in the transition to video? And what do you find the most challenging aspects of going live?
The transition to video for me has been fairly easy. I've often joked that I'm one of those people who has a face made for radio, but it's sort of an extension of that idea that I like the sound of my own voice. I think I just enjoy that, the little internet famous, which isn't real famous. I kind of like to be recognized and known, and putting myself out there. It feels good to me. So going to video, the transition wasn't tremendously challenging. Um, it's it's been it's been kind of fun. I mean, I'm just using a webcam most of the time, and I have a couple of lights here in the office, and I've set up a few things. Again, it's me being a tech geek and playing with my toys. Um, and the biggest challenge really is just planning the content. Again, here I am with planning is my weak link. It's my kryptonite. I often end up going live on my Thursday afternoon, the Podcast Lawyer Speaks session, without much of a plan. If I'm lucky, I have made saved a couple of links of things I'm going to want to talk about, and keep going on. But then I end up just riffing on a particular topic, and so that's the challenge. But again, paying attention to the audience size is also a detriment, because sometimes I'll have two people watching, and then more people will see it on the replay. But for me, it's about consistently being there and doing it, becoming and recognized as reliable, so that I'm going to be there doing it. And yeah, sometimes you don't feel like you look your best, or your background is a mess, or something, whatever else is going on. But show up and do it is my mantra on that. And I try to have a consistent theme inside the group. I am trying to be sort of training, really providing real value. So that does require a little more planning and preparation. And fortunately, I've got some of that laid out for the next little while. That's the day planner that you saw that had the calendar for all the next month or so. I know what I'm going to talk about, if not exactly what I'm going to say for each of those days.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned the course a bit earlier. Can you give a quick structure breakdown of the course? How long is the course? What things are
So,
covered?
so the course is called Easy Legal for Podcasters, and it's not currently open to the public at the moment. You were in the preview class of it, and I'm still building the product. It is probably going to be 5 modules by the time we're finished. 4 modules right now, centered around sort of the 4 pillars, or the legs holding up the table, the platform. The first being the business structures of whether to form a corporation or a limited liability company, to establish your relationships with any partners that you might have, as well as with the government, and set up some protection against risk and liability and those kinds of things. The second module deals with building your team, bringing in other people to help. And I think that's really an essential component of a business, is remembering that as the owner of the business, sorry about that, remembering that as the owner of the business, you don't have to do everything yourself. And in fact, the best way to do things is to have people who are frankly at a lower pay grade doing the stuff that doesn't need your attention, so you can focus on the most important things. But in doing that, there are legal and business transactions that need to be had, and doing them right is really important. Otherwise, you end up with people you don't expect to being co-owners of your material and things like that. The third component is the intellectual property, protecting your copyrights, your trademarks, your secrets. If you have patents to protect, that's in that area too. And the fourth element is really, that's the one where the rubber meets the road, about monetization, how to bring in advertisers, what it looks like to have affiliate sales income, how to set up sweepstakes and contests, and all those will be built into the program. And then that fifth module that I have started talking about is really just a little more around the websites and the privacy policies and terms of service, and the sort of nitty gritty of operational stuff that needs to be taken care of.
Okay, that's useful to know the structure. That's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier this year, and I see regularly being posted on various forums and Facebook groups, concern about the introduction music for a podcast, and obviously then using on the outro. Have you got any words of wisdom on this area? It seems to be an area that people are very concerned with and really don't understand what the legalities are.
Yeah. Music in podcasts, what I'll say is, many people have come to podcasting having had the experience, if not as a creator of radio programming, as a listener of radio programming. In the radio, we sort of expect to hear music and then occasionally a little bit of spoken word, maybe some analysis of the music we've just heard, or just history or explanation. But then and then we'll play another song. Well, that's wonderful. And the radio industry was set up to do that, mainly because it was an opportunity to promote the sales of records. You would hear a song on the radio and you'd go out and buy a copy of the record, or sometimes even the sheet music, And so the creators of that music got paid when you bought the music. But as we went into the digital era, it became trivially easy to copy and download and duplicate and those kinds of things. And honestly, the radio business is no longer promotional for the sale of records. It almost sort of undermines the sales of records. So as digital came into being, the music industry did not jump on board and say, sure, do it the way you do it in radio. With podcasting, you're creating a media production that is long-lived. It is not something that just happens, it's ephemeral, it's gone, and you never see that episode of that show again. With podcasts, they're around forever. And so the owners of music want to be paid for the use of the music. How that is done varies a little bit from country to country, but the general rule is you have two copyrights to consider. The first being the musical composition, the songwriter's work, and the second being the recording, the work of the artist. Well, musical compositions are owned and controlled by music publishing companies, and the recordings are owned by record labels. So you have at least two entities that you have to deal with. When a song is written by more than one person, it could be multiple publishers. It gets complicated quickly. And then you have two different ways that the podcast medium in particular is delivered. The live stream is one, which is a performance, which is one of the exclusive rights that a copyright holder owns. And the second way is the download, which is a copy being made, one of the other exclusive rights. So now you have four different components, copies and streams of compositions and recordings. And the general rule is you have to go to those publishers and record companies and ask for the permission you need for each individual song. Now, in the UK, you have PRS, which is a performing rights society. And here in the US, we have several different performing rights organizations, ASCAP and BMI and CSAC and GMR. And those folks do the streaming part for musical compositions. And I think PRS also does sound recordings, but it's only for the streaming, not for the download. And so my recommendation is go directly to the owners and get it all in one place. Reduce that multi-stop shopping to as few stops as possible. So the bottom line is, if you want to do a music show like a radio show, you better have a lot of patience and a budget in order to make that work.
Yeah, that's very useful. Now, thinking about UK-based podcasters, particularly those who may be interested in your course and the group, of course, but are concerned that the content may not align with UK law and practice. What do you say about that? Is it are the US and the UK laws so close that it's good enough, or should there be some concerns?
I think it's a terrific question, and it's a valid concern. I think that the legal principles that underlie everything I'm teaching in the course are very much the same. I mean, after all, we Americans came from the British system mainly, and our legal system is largely based on the British common law and so on. But, in the intervening several hundred years, things have diverged a bit. So there are some differences. I honestly don't know what it's like to form a business entity in the UK. So that's module 1 right there. The copyright law, there are international treaties that cover copyrights and trademarks. And so for the most part, the procedures are different, but the rules are the same. Likewise, with bringing on the team, that is absolutely a matter of contract, and contract law is very consistent from nation to nation, even other nations around the world, not just the UK. So, and then the monetization, again, is a function of copyright. And unless there are specific rules, like I talked about sweepstakes and contests, that's an area where there probably are some differences, and I would have to investigate what those are. But, a contract with an advertiser is going to be essentially the same. So yes, it's a concern, and maybe a UK podcaster would get somewhat less value from the modules that are US specific. Um, and I'm not saying I won't eventually build out something for the folks outside the US, but that's a ways off.
Yeah, but there's a fair amount of commonality, though.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, yeah.
still well worth reviewing the course and seeing.
And I think for the price point that we're offering, I don't know what the exact price point will be by the time folks hear this, but I think that it's an opportunity to get the legal primer on these principles at a relatively low cost. And even if you can't use everything, there's enough there to provide value.
Okay. Have you got a sort of relative date in mind for the next release?
Well, we're still in the building phase, and we are going to reopen the course. I believe the date is November 19th, so fairly soon.
Yep.
What I would recommend is, no matter where you're from, come into the Legit Podcast Pro group. That's legitpodcastpro.com, where I'll be doing some of that other preliminary training and talking a lot about these general principles. And that's where I'll be announcing when we reopen the doors.
Okay, brilliant. I'm just very conscious of your time. I know you've got other things to get on with. So we just mentioned some social media locations, and we mentioned that in the previous discussions. But could you just do a quick summary of where people could find out more about you, the course, and the things that you do?
Yeah, the quickest way to find me is to visit thepodcastlawyer.com, or you can find my law practice at firemark.com. If you are, well, yeah, those are the best websites to go to. Legitpodcastpro.com if you'd like to become a member of the group. And on social media, G Firemark is my handle most places. So that's how you find me.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that. I do hope you, the listeners, have found these discussions very useful. And this episode content has given you some food for thought on the legal aspects of podcasting and the entertainment industry. Selecting and engaging the services of a professional are always important. So I suggest preparing thoroughly and undertaking extensive due diligence is well worth your time and effort. So in summary, Gordon, thank you once again for your time. I hope everything is great in the air in LA, although you did say it's rather warm out there at the moment, somewhat contrary to what we have in the UK. But no, I do appreciate for all the time and effort that you've given me today on this podcast.
Dave, it's been a distinct pleasure, really. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please subscribe and leave a positive review if you can spare a minute or two. If you would like to contact me, my email address is david@thereallifebuyer.co.uk, or find me at Real Life Buyer on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, where you're welcome to direct message me. I look forward to you joining me on future episodes. Take care, and remember, save money and buy smart.